High frequency people, welcome back to the High Frequency Podcast. Look, I think I owe you all an apology. I've not had an episode of the podcast out in 4 months. The last episode that I did was in December 2023, and this wasn't by design. I fully expected and intended to come into 2024 rolling with new episodes and loads of new content, at least every month anyway. But life happened, guys. Life happened. So I didn't fulfill that intention. I'm doing a bit of a podcast update today to give you all an update on what's happened over the last 4 months, a bit about me as an artist in 2023 and what happened there, and my intention with the podcast going forward, and a few other little updates as well. So I guess we'll dive straight into it. I'll explain the absence over the last 4 months. So in January, I spent the entire month planning for my wedding, which was in the last week of February. I also spent some time planning my sets and planning the music that I was going to take to Tanifar's Den and Shipwreck Festival, because those were two appearances that would have been my first in a long time. So January was a bit of a write-off, and I just didn't get the episode out. February, obviously, as I just explained, 2 festivals and a wedding. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then after the wedding, I went on holiday for about 2 weeks. And then before I even knew it, after diving back into work, it's the end of March. And I'm recording this on the 19th of April, 2024. My intention for the first episode in 2024 was actually going to be a podcast update, just like this one. I was going to explain where I want the podcast to go, what my intention is with it, and some of the guests that I was going to have on in the year. I was also going to give a bit of an update on me and my artistry in 2023. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for quite some time, you will have most likely heard my episode that I did at the end of 2022, which was an episode on myself, who I am, why I'm hosting this podcast. And I also did a 60-minute unreleased material mix that I'd created throughout the entirety of 2022. Now, the episode that I was going to do this year, at the start of this year, was going to be somewhat similar. I was going to do a 60-minute unreleased productions mix of my material from 2023. However, when it came to actually doing it, I looked at all the material that I wanted to put in the mix, and quite a lot of the material wasn't fully finished yet and wasn't really at a place that I wanted to share it. So I set out with the intention to finish that music and make sure that it was ready to be put together in a mix. As soon as I did that, though, I felt a lot of pressure. There was a timeline that I was working to, and ultimately a deadline. And I just don't work that way with music. I don't want to go into music making with the intention to have an outcome. I want to go into music making to make music. I don't want to go into it thinking to myself, oh, I've got to release this track, or it's got to be ready in this time by this date for this podcast, or whatever it is. So my creativity completely just ended. It just halted, and it didn't feel very good. So I had to take some time off from the studio and kind of find myself again in terms of creativity. So it wasn't a great space to be in. And as a result, I still wanted to get this episode out. So I decided that I would do a full vinyl mix for you guys, which I've never done before. However, I had some issues with that as well. So for those who are watching the video at the moment, you can see behind me that I have two reloop turntables and a mixer in the middle, a 2-channel mixer in the middle. Obviously, for those who are listening to the podcast and not watching it, you can't see that, but I do have, like I just said, 2 turntables behind me with a 2-channel mixer in the middle. Now, before the mixer that I just showed you, I had a DDJ 800 controller by Pioneer behind me that were linking the 2 turntables into the mixer. And then I also had 2 CDJs as well that I could play. So essentially the setup was two vinyl turntables and then a controller in the middle with 2 CDJs on that controller. So that gave me 4 decks in a sense to play around with. However, when I tried to record the vinyl only mix, every time I'd record it, I'd get halfway through and the mixer would just completely turn off for no reason at all. So Tried it a couple of times, left it a week to see if it would just come right on its own. And then when I tried to turn it back on again, it just didn't turn on at all. So it was completely dead. So I had to send the controller to a company in Auckland to inspect and have a look at to see what was wrong with it. And there was no timeline on when I would get that back. There was no timeline on how long it might take for them to find out the issue, let alone repair it. So what I did instead was I said, you know what, when I get that controller back, I'm probably just going to sell it and get rid of it because I don't even use it much anyway. And I just thought I would buy a new mixer, 2-channel mixer that goes with my 2 vinyl turntables. So all in all, what I have behind me is a fully vinyl setup, which is fine by me because I own an absolute ton of records, which are also down here behind me as well. And I figured, for a little while, my home setup can just be vinyl. And I honestly think that'll make me a better DJ. I struggle to play just CDJs live. I find it a little bit boring sometimes. There are advantages, in my opinion. I can connect with the crowd very well because it doesn't take long to do a mix, and therefore I can really feel the energy in front of me, and therefore my track selection is a lot better. If I play fully vinyl live, which I've never done before, by the way, but if I do, I can imagine that I wouldn't really have that same connection with the crowd because I would be taking quite a long time to get the tracks at the same BPM so that I can mix them together, because it does take longer to do that with vinyl than it does on CDJs. That's just a fact. Then I thought to myself, well, going forward in the future, what I might like to do is actually have a hybrid setup. And I've played around with this a little bit before when I had the controller. And what I found was that when I have a track playing on a CDJ and the next track is going to be a vinyl record, when I start to mix that vinyl record in, if it's not actually bang on beat, I can actually adjust the CDJ to match the BPM of the vinyl record with no pitch change at all. For you vinyl record players out there, DJs, etc., you'll know that when you try to mix a record into another record, the pitch, and if it's not bang on, and you adjust the pitch, it creates a strange noise where it goes woo type thing. And it doesn't sound very good. So I think the hybrid model is actually pretty good because that means I get to play records, which I love playing records, but then I can still save some of the mixes by adjusting the CDJ and having no change to the pitch. And it sounds perfect, basically. So there is advantages and disadvantages of having a fully home vinyl setup, which you can see behind me. But honestly, I think it'll just give me time to take screens away from DJing for me, because what I've become very reliant on is the screen on the DJ setup. The CDJs, there's too many visuals for me, I think, personally. For those of you that know me, I'm not a massive fan of social media and being on my phone. And when I'm playing music, I don't want to feel like I'm doing that exact same thing, So I like the concept of playing records because it takes you away from the screen. However, it's not the most efficient way to play live. I admit that. Half the time the turntables are not set up correctly in the club. And half the time it takes you away from the crowd because it takes so long to mix a record into another record that you're kind of stressing about making sure the mix is perfect instead of connecting with the crowd in front of you and the people around you, which is really important. I think that's part of the reason that you DJ, so that you can feed off the crowd. So I think both have a lot of advantages and both have some disadvantages. So the hybrid model in between sounds perfect to me, and that's what I intend to do going forward. So I'm going to explain this at the end of this little spiel that I've got here, but I have done a 75-minute vinyl-only mix, which I'm going to tag on to the end of this podcast. I've also video recorded myself as well doing that mix. So for those of you that I've already checked out the YouTube channel, which I hope you have, and I hope you've subscribed already. And if you haven't, please do so. The vinyl-only mix and the video will be on the YouTube. Okay. On that note, we are now on YouTube. So YouTube, look, it's been a long time coming. I'm not going to lie. The YouTube thing has been requested by a lot of listeners, but I've been reluctant to do it for 2 reasons. First reason is that some guests don't like to be video recorded when they're speaking on a podcast. They've actually requested that we don't. And I've said in the background, well, actually, we don't record video anyway, so it's not a problem. And it's been a relief to those guests. So having taken that feedback on board, it made me quite reluctant to do the YouTube thing because of the feedback that I've been given by some of the artists that I've had on the podcast. The second reason is that this podcast already takes up a lot of my time. It takes up a lot of my time to edit. It takes up a lot of my time to record, to actually get the guests on, to liaise with the guests and find the right people for the podcast. So adding a video element to that would only increase the time that I have to spend on the podcast. It also would increase the cost, which I'm going to get onto in a second, because I would have to buy some video editing software. However, I've bitten the bullet and we are now on YouTube. And I think, there is some value in being on YouTube. I do really think that people want to see these conversations for their very own eyes. I think I kind of regret not getting the video of, let's say, Josh Butler or let's say Kerry Wallace from Sash, last year when I had them on the podcast. I kind of regret not getting them on video because I think those conversations would have meant a little bit more to people, to the listeners. And I think they would have taken a little bit more from it had they have seen the video and the visuals that went with it. So going forward, we are going to be on YouTube. And I would really appreciate it if you all went over to the YouTube and followed the YouTube and give your favorite episode of the past a like, because I have uploaded all the previous episodes. However, there is no video for them because we never recorded it. So all I've done is I've put a screenshot of the artist's picture, photo, whatever it may be, and I've just laid the audio over the top of it. So it looks kind of makeshift. It looks a bit crap, if I'm honest with you. But look, there was nothing else I could do unless you wanted to watch a blank screen. So, and I'm sure none of you wanted that. So, but going forward, like I said, there's going to be full video on every single episode. And I've already recorded 4 episodes for this year, and they're going to be coming out sequentially, month by month from now on. So I've got some really cool guests on, actually. I'm really looking forward to having you guys listen to their interview, so to speak, the conversation between me and them. It was great. They've got a lot of value to add, so that's why I've got them on. Third update is I've set up a Patreon account. Now, I did just mention cost just a moment ago. When I started this podcast, my intention was the exact same intention as it is now. And it was to make the podcast a free resource for up-and-coming DJs to tell their story, or producers, or whoever it may be, promoters, to tell their story, and also to have bigger, more popular guests on the podcast to tell their story as well. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because it gives the artists that need more exposure a platform, and then it gives the larger artists a platform to tell the younger, more up-and-coming DJs and producers their story, and basically tell them how they've got to where they are today. And I think having those two dynamic elements in the podcast has worked really well so far. It's come to the point now where I think I do want some support. And I'll tell you the reason why. So the podcast recording platform that I'm on right now, called Riverside, costs me a few $100s a year, a couple $100s a year. The video editing software that I've just purchased cost me a couple $100s a year. To host the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts costs me a couple $100s a year. The microphone that I've got in front of me, the webcam, the light, everything that's involved in this podcast has cost me, upwards of $1,000 basically in the first year or so, maybe year or two, if I'm honest. Now that's fine, because I never intended to make any money off the podcast. It's never going to make any money. There's no revenue coming back to me from this podcast whatsoever. And the only way that big podcasts survive, such as the Joe Rogans of the world, is that they have sponsors and advertisers, and they have contracts, and, they have so many followers and so many listeners that they get paid for that kind of thing. I'm never going to be on that level. There's no intention to be on that level either. So there's no revenue coming in from this podcast. The only money that's involved in this podcast is the money coming out of my pocket. Now, as I said, I'm not particularly bothered about that, but I would like some support if possible. So I've set up a Patreon account, which is completely voluntary, and there's a tip jar on there for $2.50. And, you can donate some more money if you wish, or you can donate less. But there is sort of a payment method on there that you can tip the podcast if you've got some value out of it, or you've been a guest on the podcast in the past that you've got some value out of it that way, or you've shared it with a friend and they've really enjoyed it. Encouraging them to support the podcast financially would be a really good idea, because it will encourage me going forward to keep the podcast alive. Because although I mentioned over the last 4 months have been very busy, there have been several times over the last year where I've considered ending the podcast because it's costing me quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time. And I was really hoping when I started the podcast that the connections that I make in the industry would allow me to get gigs, so that then the gigs could pay for the podcast. The intention of the gigs was always to take that money and put it into the podcast. But that's never happened, and no gigs have ever come my way as a result of this podcast, unfortunately. So it's kind of not panned out the way I'd hoped. So if you feel so kind and you feel like you want to donate to the podcast, I don't expect anyone to do so. It's completely voluntary, and there'll be never any expectation that anyone pays for this podcast. The link will be in the podcast description, or the description of this YouTube video if you're watching it on YouTube. And yeah, feel free to go over there and support me if you wish. Every donation that I get will go into the podcast. It'll help pay for the subscription. It'll help pay for the video editing software. It'll help pay for everything involved. And funnily enough, as I was just moving my room around, my studio around just now, I actually knocked my computer monitor over and smashed it. So that's going to cost me another $300. And I wouldn't have had to move my room around if I wasn't doing this podcast. So it's stuff like that you just don't see behind the scenes that happen all the time that cost me quite a bit of money that involves in this podcast. So I would appreciate your help. That's going to be the last thing I'm going to say on this, but I will mention it in other podcasts. I will plug it, but there'll be no pressure for anyone to ever pay. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear. So the last thing that I want to go over is just a little bit about me as an artist in 2023, because I had a pretty difficult year for various reasons. And it started out really well, actually. For those of you that noticed, I released a track on a various artists EP on a label called Need Records, which is run in the Netherlands, I think. And some really big artists have been on that label. They've released some great music on that label. I don't think my track was ready to be released, if I'm completely honest with you. I should not have released that track. However, it's out there now, and it seems to be somewhat popular. It's had thousands of listens on Spotify, and the release got up to, I think, number 20 or 30 in the Beatport charts, which was pretty cool, actually. I was quite impressed by that. I wasn't expecting it to do that well. It appears that both of my tracks, I've only released 2 so far. It appears both of those tracks have done pretty well on Beatport. My intention going forward is not to have too much music on Beatport, though. I would like to keep it a little bit more underground. I'd like to stick to some more vinyl or Bandcamp releases, if possible. Of course, my intention is actually just to get my music out there. So I've considered recently that some of the music that I made in 2022, which you will have heard on that 60-minute mix that I did in December 2022, some of that music is actually okay. Like, it's not music that I would consider sending to a label, but it's actually okay. So what I've done is I've got them all those tracks from 2022 mastered by a professional mastering engineer. And I'm going to be releasing 1 track per month for the rest of the year on my Bandcamp. They're not going to cost a lot of money, because really I just want my music out there, but they'll be on my Bandcamp, and I'll link my Bandcamp in the description of this podcast below so that you can go over there and check out the latest release, which will be out in a couple of weeks' time. And if you're not following me on Instagram as well, please do so, because that's where I will announce the podcast updates, the podcast episodes that are coming out, and also any releases on my Bandcamp or any other releases externally that I ever do. On the back of the release talk, I do have an EP coming out this year, which is been signed to my friend's label, which I'm really excited about. They're 2 really after-hours-y tracks, like really 4 o'clock in the morning kind of weird tracks. definitely the vibe that I'm going for at the moment. That's always the sort of music that I've loved. And there's a really sick remix from a larger artist coming as well. So keep your eyes peeled for it. It's going to be pretty special. I'm quite excited for that one. Now in 2023, after I started out with that release at the beginning of the year, I actually signed 3 more EPs to other labels in 2023. But I've been very, very unfortunate, and I'll tell you why. So the first EP was signed to another friend's label, but the label never actually got off the ground. It appeared to be quite difficult for the label owner, and things just never came to fruition for him, and therefore my EP was never actually released, which was a shame. But to be fair, some of those tracks are still going to be released on my Bandcamp anyway, so they're going to get out there, just not yet. The second EP was signed to a vinyl-only record label in Australia, actually someone that I know from the UK. Very, very good label, been around for a long time. He'd signed the record, and he said that it was going to be the last record that came out on the label ever. Unfortunately, that never happened. He said to me that he wanted to dedicate some more time to his wife and his children, and he didn't want to continue with the label. It had done its time, and it was time to put it to bed. So unfortunately, that release didn't go ahead either. I've still got those tracks, and I'll probably still put them out on my Bandcamp at some point. The last one was I signed a 4-track EP with different tracks to Blind Vision Records in the UK, which you may have heard of because they've had some big artists on that label, such as Toman. And I thought I'd done it at that point. I was like, yes, I've signed a 4-track EP to, one of the most popular labels that have been around for absolutely ages, and they've done really well. I'll get loads of exposure out of it. And then 3 months after signing the records, I sent the pre-masters to the label owner, and he came back to me and he said, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't continue with the digital label anymore because I have to go back home to South America because I've got a family emergency and I can't really think about the label right now. Of course, absolutely legitimate excuse, and I took no offense to it. And he just said, as long as you can wait, we will get that record out there. However, the last time I spoke to him was in August last year, and it's been a long time. So I'm pretty sure that there's no digital releases coming out on that label anytime soon. He's not released anyone else's music either, so it looks like it's gone kind of kaput. Maybe he's lost motivation for it. I'm not too sure. So that's 12 tracks that got signed but didn't get released. So I was pretty unfortunate in 2023 with releases, unfortunately. Look, I don't hold it against the labels. They all had their reasons and their legitimate excuses, but I guess these things happen, and it's just unfortunate, and we'll get some music out there eventually. One last thing that I want to touch on is that I played Tanifar's Den and Shipwreck Festival this year in February. And they were very, very contrasting experiences. And I kind of want to be transparent about this because a lot of you people that are listening to this or watching this, you'll be in New Zealand and you will have heard of these two festivals. I want to start off with a positive. So Shipwreck Festival was an absolute pleasure to play at. It was an absolute pleasure to be involved. Logan Baker has done some fantastic things with that festival. I would say it's probably the best festival that I've been to in a long, long time. The production quality is amazing. The sound system that he has there is amazing. The fact that he gets international and local artists involved is just so cool. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. Honestly, it really was. The artist liaison, Yama, was fantastic. The communication was just next level. Everything was very transparent. Yeah, I had an amazing experience, and I would love to play there again, simply just because it's so well organized and it's just so professional. And if you haven't already got your tickets for 2025, this is a plug for Shipwrecked because they are now available. So please do go buy your tickets for 2025 and I will hopefully see you there. I am going to call this festival out. Some of you may have seen a bit of a shitty post on my Instagram a couple of months ago after I played Tanifar's Den. Some of you who are listening to this may have played Tanifar's Den and had a completely different experience. And to be honest with you, I hope you did have a different experience to me because I wouldn't want anyone to have the same experience that I did. So I got booked for Tanifar's Den in August 2023. I got told at that point that the artist liaison would be in touch with me within the next month. I first got communication from the artist liaison in November 2023, so 3 months after I got booked for it. Pretty brief information. It was kind of more about, hey, this is me. Have you got any questions type thing? And I had a few questions, and every single time I asked some questions or I sent an email, it took weeks for them to get back to me. Weeks, you know. It got to the point where I hadn't even got a set time. I hadn't even got any information about the festival at all. And we were less than a month out from the festival. You might have noticed that I posted about it on my Instagram probably about 2 weeks before the festival actually went ahead, because that's when I first got the actual artwork. That's when I first got information about the set time. That's when I first got any information. Yeah, it's safe to say it was pretty lackluster. But the thing that annoyed me the most is that I asked if there was payment for the festival. Now, for those of you that know me well, you'll know that I don't care about money for playing gigs. I don't. It's not why I do it. I have a full-time job that pays me enough money. I don't need money from a gig. It's not my life income. You know, I don't need it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice when I get it, but if I have to play for free, I'm fine with that. That's not a big deal for me. I can understand why some people won't want to play for free because it's their sole income, and that makes sense. You know, it's literally their income. Whilst I don't rely on DJing for my income. So when they said to me there was no payment, I thought to myself, okay, that's cool, no problem. But I would like some payment to actually get to and from the festival, because surely that you're going to pay the artist to get there and back. And when I questioned that, I got told that there was no compensation for travel. So hear me out. There was no payment for the gig, and there was no payment for or compensation for the travel to get there and back. What they were expecting is me to pay for my own way to get there, and then me to play for free. They were treating me like a charity, basically. I don't really get gigs very often, so I was chomping at the bit to get it to play. I really was, and I consequently went. It cost me over $100 in petrol to get there and back. So I actually paid them to play at their festival. I'm a little bit embarrassed about that, if I'm honest with you. I kind of wish I hadn't done it. And you know, what are your thoughts, guys? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's wrong? Like, do you think artists should be treated that way? Fortunately enough, like I just said before, I don't rely on it for my income. So I was in a position to be able to play for free, but half the artists that I saw play might not have been in that position. So yeah, I just found it really strange, quite rude. Yeah, it made me not want to go back. I won't be supporting the festival anymore. I won't be going back. I'll never pay for a ticket, and I will definitely not play there again unless they offer to pay me for the festival, and I won't take it for free next time. You know, I've spent thousands of dollars on records over the last 10, 15 years, thousands, and spent so much time on my own music, and I was offering to do a full unreleased material set of my own material, and that just wasn't respected enough to be even paid. So like I said, wasn't bothered about the payment, but some compensation for travel would have been nice. I don't want to end this podcast on a negative note. I just want to say to you guys, be wary of that festival, because I think the festival owners have got they've got their priorities in a bit of a twist. But for those of you out there that are able to go to Shipwrecked, I would 100% encourage you to support that festival. Logan Baker's a good friend of mine, so of course I want you to support him. But it's not because of him. It's because the festival that he's created is just awesome, and I will definitely be back there next year. I think that's probably everything. I think it is anyway. I hope I've not missed anything out, but we are around 30 minutes here of me waffling on in this accent, which is probably driving you all crazy. So I'm going to leave it there. What I do want to say is I just bought this new microphone that's in front of me here, and I'm recording this after I've recorded 4 episodes of the podcast that's going to come out after this episode. I've bought this new microphone because my old one was pretty shit, if I'm honest with you. It was just, the audio quality was terrible. When I was editing it all in Ableton, I just couldn't get the levels right. It was really glitchy. And honestly, I just figured I'm going to have to spend a decent amount of money on a microphone, which is all good. I just want you to be aware that when you do listen to the episodes that are about to come out between now and June, the audio might not be the best on my part. But to be fair, the podcast episodes aren't about me, they're about the guest. And the guests have all had decent quality microphones. So I'm sure you would prefer listening to them. Just bear in mind that the audio quality might not be as good as it has been in the past. And lastly, like I said, I'm just going to remind you that, to subscribe to the YouTube if you haven't already. And for those of you that are listening to this, you'll find the link to the YouTube in the podcast description. You'll also find the link to the YouTube on my link tree, which is in the bio of my Instagram. You can go and find my Instagram by going to at Vedana Music. And there's also a high frequency page, but honestly, I've kind of let that go a little bit. I haven't really done much on there for quite some time. I should pick it back up again if I'm honest with you, but I find it tough enough managing one Instagram page, let alone two. So I guess that's just my nature. Okay, guys. Last thing that I would like to say is that you're about to hear a 75-minute vinyl only mix that I did yesterday. For those that are listening to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or Google, you will be hearing it now because it will be in the same episode. However, on the YouTube clips, or the YouTube episode, I'm putting all the conversations that I've had in the past separate to the mixes that guests have given me. And the reason for that is because no one was really listening to the mixes, if I'm honest with you. And I felt that was probably something to do with the length of the podcast. So I am now separating them on YouTube. So you'll find a playlist for the interviews, the conversations that I'm having with people, and you'll find a playlist for the mixes that people have done for the podcast in the past. My vinyl only mix that you're about to listen to, or on YouTube you're about to watch, will not be in this video. It will be in another separate video on YouTube in the mixes section. I will link that in the description of this YouTube video, but who knows? When I edit this, I might just put it onto this video anyway. Who knows? But for those of you that are listening, I hope you enjoy the mix. Look, it's not the tightest mix in the world. I'm still not the best vinyl DJ in the world. I don't intend to be. It's a bit of fun, and I do have a lot of fun making it. The mix is good enough. In a club, I would get away with any of the little mistakes that you can probably hear, but yeah, just bear that in mind that it is full records that I'm playing, and I hope you enjoy the track selection. I hope you do. It took me a long time to go through my records and pull these ones out. There was a lot of competition to go into this mix. I'm not going to lie, competition from other records that I did want to put in it, but it would have ended up being a 2 hour long mix, and I don't want it to be 2 hours. So if you do want the track IDs to any of these tracks, please just ask me on Instagram, or please just leave a comment in the video on YouTube for the mix, or a comment in this will also be uploaded to SoundCloud as well, my SoundCloud. You can comment on the episode on SoundCloud as well, so you'll be able to ask me there. But the best place to ask me for the track IDs is either YouTube, in the YouTube comments, or on my Instagram. Happy to tell you what the track IDs are. They've been some of the records are quite old. Some of the records are 5+ years old. Some of the records are relatively new. So there's a mixture of new and old in this mix, and I hope you enjoy it. So thanks for listening, everyone. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can get some music out there this year. Like I said, be on the lookout on my Bandcamp, and onwards and upwards with the podcast. And I appreciate you all. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you soon.
move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me. Come on, dance with me, move your body, your legs with me.
dun.